You can own a piece of a cannabis company for less than an ounce, realistically. Yep. Like $250 ounce, that's like on the cheaper side. So we're not doing too bad there. Like, that's a good investment, guys. Like, think about it. Just skip your next bag and buy a piece of a farm.
When something is made for $10 or something is made from your mum when you're not well, the difference, how your body responds to that is immeasurable.
Yeah, mum's chicken noodle soup.
100%. And that carries through in everything.
So, I like to say words.
Very cool.
Yeah. You touched on the drive change movement, and that's a huge issue here in Australia where, cannabis patients are being discriminated against. You don't have roadside drug tests for opioids or benzos. And look, I'm all for safety on the roads. But in the end, the roadside drug tests for cannabis don't test if you're under the influence. They test if you have a presence.
What they realised, this is 30, 40 years ago, if they capture that frequency of the morning chorus of all the birds singing in the morning, and they capture that frequency, and then they play it on the crop, it opens the stomata up. So they're actually able to grow faster and yield heavier plants by playing this particular frequency.
It lends to, it's not just the people's plant, it's the family plant for you guys. Like, it's so much more than just providing it to the people. This is providing to your family and beyond.
Grab your chop, take a big hit, take a trip down under and don't quit it. Sit back and relax, you got Joel LaGrasso in the house. He's the host of the Fab Podcast, and he's telling you to take a big old hit. Grab your buds and join the Fab, where we keep it pretty chill, talking about the...
G'day, friendly Aussie buds. Welcome back to the FAP. I have today, just have a quick look at where we are. I'm here at the People's Plant with Emily Rigby and Ben Risby-Jones, and we're in the beautiful sunny coast, and we're at, a cannabis farm. Look at these plants, guys. Like, just have a look, soak it up, see the beauty. I am surrounded by buds. I might have died and woken up in heaven. You tell me. I don't know. This is the dream. Guys, welcome to the dream.
Yeah, welcome, yes.
Thank you for inviting me to your dream.
Thank you for coming, Joseph.
I just want to get a quick kind of who you guys are, just as individuals. Like, how did you come into the cannabis space? And then we'll go into a little bit of what you guys are trying to do here at the People's Plant. So, Emily, how did you come into cannabis?
It's always a good question. So I am a horticultural research scientist. Was working in ornamental horticulture when I first finished university. So all the pretty plants that you can't eat or smoke, for that matter. And it was about 7 or 8 years into that career that I was starting to think, as glamorous as it sounds to have fallen into flowers. When I finished uni, it wasn't really the career that I'd chosen. So I was looking for something to give back more to humanity. And not to say that, cut flowers and ornamental nursery plants don't make people happy. I just wanted to do...
make me happy.
Yeah, I wanted to give back a little bit more. And it was over a few years I was trying to work out what that was. And in 2016, when legislative changes came into effect in February, I still remember exactly where I was on that day. I knew that was the crop that I was waiting for. And it was at that time that I was embarking on a Nuffield International Farming Research Scholarship. And during that time, I was able to get my foot in the door of a few facilities in the US, Canada, and Israel. And during those travels, I just knew that I had to take that leap of faith. And I must say, I was a little afraid it was career suicide. But look, we look back now, 8.5 years down the track, and what a great
kind of made
decision.
it. Just quickly on just getting those opportunities to go to those farms. Like, how does that work? Like, I know so many people that are like, how do I work on a bloody farm? Like, what was your little opportunity? Like, who told you, oi, come join me and come check this out?
You mean while I was traveling?
Yeah, like, how did you get the opportunities to get to those farms?
Yeah, look, it was pretty fortuitous. As part of the Nuffield schedule, we actually were invited to a farm in Canada. In Florida, I happened to be visiting a guy that, someone had connected me to him. And then he was like, oh, I see you're also interested in cannabis. Did you know my wife's working at one of the first facilities in Florida? And, it was just, I don't want to say it's luck, but it's, sometimes the universe has plans for you. And I really feel like, things
if you're already on the path, the universe will be like, here's a door, try it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And Ben, how about your history? I know you're a herbalist, but that's 30 years of experience. How can you sum up your wonderful work in a couple minutes here?
Okay. So I graduated with an applied science degree in naturopathy, and a big part of naturopathy is herbalism. How did I find my way to cannabis? So I think cannabis has sort of been a theme throughout that. Like I think I used to wear a hat. Herbs is the first medicine when I was at uni. And cannabis was always on the radar, but it was not part of the materia medica. So it was not part of the therapeutics that we had access to. So when legalization came, it was just a no-brainer for me to accommodate the wonderful healing properties that medicinal cannabis has, and to then do whatever I could to try to remove the stigma and then allow people to have genuine benefits and access to it. I find it's just a shame the way our culture is treated the plant, and then as we're moving into a more liberal relationship with it, it's really skewed into profiteering. And that restricts access, the profiteering aspect of it. So what we're trying to do is address that aspect of the industry so that we can help people have access.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm kind of curious, when you're at university and you're studying with a bunch of other people that are really into plants and like natural medicines, how much talk was there of cannabis? Because this would have been maybe 25, 30 years ago. So, like, were people talking about it? Were the lecturers mentioning anything? Like, was it like, we all know that this is something, but we can't talk about it? Or,
to be honest, with the lecturers, the professors at the time, they just didn't go there. Just didn't go there. Amongst the students, I think there was a lot more curiosity and a lot more. There was just a lack of understanding. There was a knowledge that it has a profound effect on people. Like, there's no doubt about that. It has a massive impact on when you introduce it to the system. But we didn't know, is it adaptogenic? Is it euphoric? Is it digestive? Is it we categorize herbs in their therapeutic action. And it's kind of ridiculous how many therapeutic actions it has. So it doesn't really fit into the categories of other herbs very well. It's an interesting specimen, to be honest.
Class of its own.
I like to think of cannabis as like alien. Like, there's nothing quite like it. It's like, what do you mean these little crystals give me all of these effects and they're just grown on this plant naturally and I don't have to do anything else to it? Magic, like, realistically, pure magic to me. It's mostly because of like how direct it is, where other kinds of herbs and medicines, it's like on application and over time you get the benefit, where cannabis, it's like you smoke it or vape it, you immediately get the benefit. I don't know. Can you think of other plants? Like, I mean, this is your realm. Like, what other plants give you almost that immediate relief or?
Yeah, so there are plants that have massive immediate effects. So an example might be cayenne pepper.
Oh, I love cayenne.
Have you ever tried smoking it?
No.
Yeah, so we experimented with stuff like that when I was at uni. We experimented with cayenne pepper. What happens when you smoke it? It's a massive peripheral vasodilator. So it dilates all the blood vessels, and then it stimulates blood flow. So you get this thumping heart, boom, 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 and you get all this blood moving to the extremities of your body. It has a very profound effect. Same as Coriodalis.
So where would you use that? So
you generally don't smoke cayenne pepper,
but if you were to tell someone like what would be the use?
So if you had someone that so if you had someone with profound advanced diabetes, where blood circulation to their proximity, their extremities, say their legs, their feet, is really restricted, and you're wanting to get that blood movement, cayenne pepper. Okay. There's actually multiple applications for that particular therapeutic action.
Okay. And so at university, you guys were talking about smoking other kinds of plants.
Well, inhalation is one of the dose formats. Yeah, inhalation. So there's a herb called ephedra that is also restricted for public access. Ephedra is for an amazing plant for asthma when you inhale it.
Okay.
Yeah. You
so-
inhale you inhale ephedra, and you'll actually resolve an asthma attack.
What-
So, yeah, there's multiple
lots of
herbs.
lots of herbs that can give us these immediate effects, but me as just a normal individual have no concept of. That's hectic.
But I think it's because we've lost that knowledge. You know, we've come from plant medicine.
Yeah.
The garden was our pharmacy, and we've somehow, you know, prohibited a lot of these amazing substances. You know, we've recently seen psychedelic medicines downscheduled in Australia so they can be prescribed, although it's still really difficult.
Full psychiatrist, and I think you have to have like 2 on site when you take them. It's pretty full on.
Yeah, but we're starting to see some of our ancient medicines coming back into the hands of the people. And that's, you know, one of the things that's really important to us here is, you know, helping return cannabis to the people. But of course, we've got to work within the regulatory framework in order to do that. But we're also lobbying for your rights as well, because we've seen a lot of change in the last 8.5 years, but we want to see a lot more in the next 8.5 years.
That's it. I think pretty much anyone that's in this industry knows it's a little bit of a farce that it is as restricted as it is, considering, well, I saw in your clip the other day, we could buy 2 or 3 bottles of spirits in a bottle store and literally kill ourselves. Meanwhile, we couldn't buy any amount of cannabis to kill ourselves. So in terms of harm reduction, what are we doing? So I really commend you guys for being true plant people. Now, the reason why we're actually here today is the People's Plant is doing a capital fundraise that's being crowdfunded, which gives you, an individual, an opportunity to own a small piece of this cannabis farm, or this potential cannabis farm. And guys, we'll have some B-roll, but when I look out, it's just hundreds of meters of land, just hundreds of meters of land. And all I can picture is this full of weed. I want weed everywhere here, and it would be a sanctuary for all. But the room for growth for you guys, for expansion, it almost seems limitless in the land that you've got here. It's so well taken care of. You've got 2 beautiful dam ponds that had ducks in it. The grounds are just well taken care of. Whoever's been taking care of this property has done a really, really, really nice job. So hats off to you guys for that. But I wanted to just get a little bit of a landscape for the Fab audience to understand what this investment actually is. Because right now, behind us, we've got some beautiful plants that you've been doing R&D on for 5, almost 6 years. So why did we start with R&D and not going straight into production? Like, why are you not producing medical cannabis for the Australian community yet?
Actually, it was probably a bit of luck, to be honest. We originally got our license back in 2019, and it was for 27-ton annual production. So that 12 acres that you see over there, that was our stage 1 footprint, and the indoor horse arena was the drying room. And thank God we didn't do that. That would have been 1 crop a year. It would have been broadacre. And it would have just been very, very difficult to manage. Massive amount of labor required for a very short period of time, and then nothing. And then if we had a weather event that comes through, we would have lost a lot. And it's done for the year. So thank God we didn't jump straight in. I've always wanted to grow outdoors. So we then started to develop modeling on how to reduce those risks. So the big risk was one single weather event could wipe our whole year's crop out. We got to work out how to resolve that issue. So that was this perpetual harvest model where we're vegging under extended light periods and then putting them out to flower. So step by step we were resolving problems. What was the question?
What's this fundraise for, and ultimately, like, what are people buying into, and how much of this you're trying to turn into?
So our stage 1 production in our amended license is 9.5 ton. So if someone was to come on board and invest with us, you would get a ordinary share per $1 spent or $1 invested in the People's Plant or in the parent company, Ausmedican. That Ausmedican is the parent company, and the People's Plant is the brand as such. The share would give you the opportunity, the same shares that I have as everyone else. They're all the same. They're all ordinary shares. They all are entitled to dividends. As a part of that investment, there are certain perks. There will be access to concession on products. You'll be notified for any new products that are coming out. We're looking very, very deeply into different aspects of concentrates, and we're wanting to have a nice range of different concentrates available to the Australian public, patients, that you'll have access to before anyone else does if you invest. So there's certain priorities given to people that
Different tiers.
we're able to give back something, because to be 100% honest, without people's support, we can't make this reality. And making this reality, there's no point to it if we can't give back to the people. So there's this mutual relationship that we're wanting to develop. And it's this ongoing relationship that we're wanting to develop. And the people that are investing in the People's Plant, I hope that they will be our biggest advocates. So we will do our utmost best to look after them as best we possibly can for perpetuity. And then they will have a wonderful experience and then share that experience with their friends and family.
Makes a sense. It's like a brand for the people, by the people.
Exactly.
I think there's a lot of the cannabis community can probably resonate with feeling a little ripped off by some of the pharmaceutical companies. It's one of the things where they're like, I'm not going to name names, but they could import something from Canada, jar it up over here, and then they'll call it something, maybe a colloquial term for cannabis. Meanwhile, the cannabis wasn't even grown here, but they're taking the naming rights of our country, our land, and putting it on their product. Now, I know that's just a name to some, but to me, like, cannabis that comes from the land kind of belongs a lot to the land. So I really like how you guys have come in more as farmers and herbalists, rather than, this is the next big frontier for pharmaceutical land to grab a piece before cannabis replaces a lot of their medicines. As you talked about with like all of the applications to so many potential things cannabis can treat, it's very threatening if you're a company that has products that are treating those individual conditions when you have a one-size-fits-all kind of approach with cannabis. So you guys coming in for the people is something I think the people will really receive. I think one of the biggest struggles for the people, just on my transparency sake, a lot of the companies that have come out in Australia, especially anything that's gone publicly listed, there hasn't been a return for investors in Australia. Like, a lot of people have been very disappointed by cannabis as a whole as an investment here. Again, I don't want to name names, but no one's really made a whole lot of money. In fact, a lot of people have lost little fortunes, which is kind of sad to see. Do you guys have any plans to eventually become a public company, or are you off trying to keep it private with the people who come in on this investment and maybe another round or two, but trying to maintain it as as private, or eventually looking at like an IPO and going public?
To be honest, an IPO is a pretty big event. It's certainly not in my wheelhouse. It's not in my experience. I've just run smaller companies and businesses. What the future holds for Ozmedican and the People's Plant is yet to be seen. So I don't know if it will go IPO or not. It's a massive step. Like, I think people talk about it in a light way, but it's not a light undertaking. No. It's a very big undertaking. And you're dead right. There's been a lot of disappointment in the industry. I think some of the expectations that have been placed is unrealistic. So where they're doing all their modeling on when the market was at its peak, and they're saying that these are the returns you will get, and then all of a sudden it wasn't at its peak anymore. Yeah.
Well, you have doctors just presently, prescribing potentially 50% less just because new regulations are coming in. That immediately impacts product sales by half. Like, if you can only prescribe half as much and people are only grabbing half, you've immediately lost 50% of revenue for every company in the industry. Granted, we'll have new patients coming on and all of that, but effectively things like that with such a regulated market can completely turn your company from thriving one day to not the next. And I think that's a big risk for the cannabis companies here. But something that I noticed for you guys, because you've been in R&D for 5 or 6 years, I kind of wanted to talk a bit about that. I read you had, was it 160 trial crops or 150 plus trial crops?
We're up to about 170 now.
170?
Yep.
It's a good effort. I think a lot of these companies that went public early, they didn't have any trial crops. They kind of almost just went, let's put some seeds and start selling this.
Yeah.
And obviously that's a bit of a mistake. We know why. But I'd like to kind of share to the audience what you guys have learned about 5-6 years of R&D in these genetics on the Sunshine Coast, how that's kind of factored into your pest control, how that's factored into even your cultivar selection. Like, how did you choose your genetics? Where did they come from? Just a bit about like your general cultivation, your R&D into your cultivation, into your cultivars.
Okay. So basically a plant hasn't the ability to move. So a plant has all the recessive genetics within that plant to help it adapt to situations, because it can't move. Like if it's in a cold environment and it's adapted to that cold environment, everything's good, and then all of a sudden the weather changes and it's hot, it has genetics to help deal with that. And it may take a number of generations for those genetics to set and become dominant. It's the same with cannabis. It's a very elastic genetic plant. So there's so many recessive genes. So regardless, we were very specific about our genes, but regardless of where you're getting your genetics from, you're needing to acclimatize them to your specific microclimate, your geographical location. So that takes generations. And that's part of the R&D that we've been doing. Is the first crop is very different from the crops that we have now, but we've used the same genetic lineage. But we're teasing out particular traits that work really well for us here. And we actually don't need to do that. The plant does it by itself. So as much as anything, we're custodians and nature does the work.
Makes a lot of sense.
Like that part is probably the bits that's missing a lot. That actually nature's in control. And all we do is, as best, guide it and support it. Yep. Nature knows what it's doing.
Are we able to talk at all about like genetic profiles, like anything in terms of strains and things like that you're trying to kind of put together?
So we've stabilized a number of different strains. With the methodology of using cuttings and a mother plant, you can turn one plant into an unlimited amount of flower. So stabilizing strains is a term for seeds. So it's more if we're wanting to lock up a particular quality for later on, or to pass it to someone that we can't pass clones to. The different genetics that we've utilized, it's fairly broad. Our ethos and our intention is that we will always be R&Ding, we will always be developing, we will always be supporting nature to evolve and guiding it in a way in which is a reciprocal thing. It works for us, it works for the plant. So it's ongoing. We if you say Durban poison, and Durban poison is a name, and that name relates to a cultivar, and that cultivar probably has a million different phenotypical expressions of that one particular cultivar. And if you say, oh, this is Durban poison, it's not the same as that Durban poison, and so on and so forth. So using cultivars or strain names we need to get a bit past that. So we're sort of, in our particular modeling, we actually just categorize. So it's numbering. We just have to make sure that we're tracking every single plant, and then we can replicate that plant. But we're not looking at strain names at this point in time. Once we're commercial, we will actually put it into the community and make it a fun interactive activity. What name do you think this could be called? And some of that interaction, we're wanting to probably have a small group of core testers, so to speak, that we will provide product to, that they will help us
your medication trial.
Medication trials.
To give like at least a feeling of how that's interacting with their system.
Yep.
It is a personal experience for many, and some people will completely respond differently to other things, but there seems to be a pretty broad consensus with cannabis that certain types will probably do this for the majority of people. But I've definitely met people that are like, oh man, if I have a sativa, I'm falling asleep. And you're like, what do you mean? But it happens.
Yeah, I mean, your endocannabinoids system is as unique as your fingerprint. So, that's why we really need to get away from these, the simple categorization of sativa and indica, which has really moved away from what the original definition of that was. And with all the different terpenes, it's just it's not enough. I need more details, to drill into the different terpenes and minor cannabinoids, and then hone in on what works, what works best. It is a real personalized
I really
medicine.
like the scale. So like you kind of have like uplifting and sedating, and then you have clear and cloudy. And then it's like, where do you plot there? And that's how I kind of describe it. It's like traditional sativa I expect to be uplifting and clear. But there are definitely some sativas that are not very clear, but they're very uplifting, and you're just a little derpy. Like for me, like an Amnesia Haze, you're kind of forgetting everything. You're cloudy headed, but man, are you rolling around and just having a good time. That's my Amsterdam strain for context. But like you have a joint of that in the morning, off on adventures you go, but you don't really remember what you did. But if I had something more on like the lemonine sort of end, and you're kind of going for like a super lemon haze, that's actually quite clear headed and uplifting. So there's that. But then on the sativa indica end, how you're saying we've gone so far away from that, we have. But I think some people kind of forget that sativa indica, it's really just marketing terms, just to give people an idea of what to expect in feeling. It's not really like the traditional cannabis sativa or cannabis indica. We're no longer talking about that. When we talk about indica sativa, we're just talking purely about should make you feel like this. And I think that's where like a lot of the community gets really like riled up, and it's like, oh, that's not a traditional sativa, that's not a landrace sativa, and you're like, that's not the point. It's like, what does it make you feel?
It's no longer the point. It was originally, but we've moved way too far from the the correct definitions. And that's where, for me, I want to see the terpene profiles. I want to know the percentage of terpenes that's in the finished product, and I want to see the top terpenes. And we're seeing a lot more of that.
People are putting that on labels, or at least if it's going on to like review platforms like Catalyst or Canna Reviews, and the COAs are there, and we're like, oh, that's what I'm buying. Cool, I get to know. One issue we've got, though, in this industry is you've got people that are testing for terpenes overseas and people that are testing for terpenes here. Ones overseas test for way more, like maybe 400 terpenes, where here they maybe test for 30. So different results, different percentages. And then as a result, the data we've got is like not comparable. And you're like, there should be some sort of standard, but I'm not a regulator. So that's a little bit about the genetics. All right, I want to talk a little bit about your cultivation methods. So in your fundraise, you've kind of mentioned that you're looking to do 5 styles of growing, like different techniques, which is pretty ambitious. Like as a small business owner myself, I kind of know doing too many things spreads me out really thin. And I'm just wondering, how do you see having 5 different methods going? So you're talking about like living soil organic, soil grown, salt grown, indoor, outdoor.
So
what are we thinking?
I'll run you through them. So we've dialed in 5 different methodologies. The first is indoor, straight indoor hydro.
Like cocoa?
Koya. So we're using Koya and salt. So it's pretty standard.
Traditional. Yep.
And it's pretty predictable, pretty easy. The second would be, say, living soil organics. So that would be certifiable. We could certify that one. The third one would be living soil organics. So the living soil organics, that one, where we are only irrigating. The certification part means that it has to get at least 80% of its nutrients from the soil itself. Whereas it gets pretty much 100% of its nutrients from that nutrient bag underneath that pot. That's hard to do. That's hard to scale. The second one would be living soil, giving it organic fertilizer.
Yeah, having amendments and...
Yeah, so this pot would have living soil organics in it, and we would feed it organic fertilizers. So that would be purely organic, but much easier to scale. The third one would be Koya, and then we're feeding it organics.
Feeding it organics.
Through the drippers. And then the fifth one would be salt-based.
Salt.
So all of these have different price points. And basically, we're able to meet the market where the market is. So if we will have a B2C pathway where we're under the people's plant, and we will be able to provide a product to patients through directly. And then we will also be B2B, so supporting other businesses for white label. And so if a company comes and they say, we really want living soil, totally certifiable, nothing but. And there is a company that does say that. So, okay, yeah, we can fulfill that order. And another company say, we just want really, really, really cheap. Oh, well, that's hydro, salt-based. We can fulfill that. We can do it all on the same platform. So our structure supports all of those 5 methodologies, except for the indoor. It stands alone. Our concept with the indoor is that initially we will start growing, we will flower indoors, and then it's just a very easy way to meet the market. The market's kind of at that place at the moment, and it gives us an opportunity to grow whatever strain is fanciful today. As we're doing that, we will be developing our outdoor long-term game. So the outdoors are more of a long-term game. The indoors, you can turn it on, you can turn it off.
It seems like you really like your outdoor sun-grown produce. It seems like you're trying to avoid the indoor, but that's a good way to keep a cash flow going and keep you in the market and get you in as soon as possible, really.
That's right. It's straight out of the gate, the indoors. And the long-term proposal is the outdoor, and then those indoor rooms will turn into mother rooms. So we'll be able to run hundreds of strains simultaneously. So we'll be repurposing those. So there's a big picture, a long-term picture where those rooms are very critical, and we're just utilizing the space in the short term.
In terms of like building your soil, can you tell us a little bit about like how you build, like what kind of stuff are you putting in your soil, and how do you actually, my like concern is how do you keep developing that soil if you're not maybe growing it all the time? Like just curious as how you're going to build that beautiful, rich soil.
It is a bit of an art, to be honest. We went through probably about 10 or 15 trials on refining the perfect mix. We started with reverse engineering some of the very popular and successful soils that are out there commercially, reverse engineering those, and then looking at ways we can commercially create a similar product. Commercially meaning we can do that on volume. Yeah. Like we're talking trucks.
It's not easy to make soil. A lot of people like kind of you just get some dirt out of the ground. I'm like, no. There's like 100 other steps.
I found the largest worm farm in Australia. We went and visited them on site. They're up at Bundaberg. Because you need vast amounts of worm castings. You need vast amounts of, there's so many things. And you cannot have one trace of heavy metals in there. You can't have any chemicals. It's got to be as clean as clean as clean. So it's actually a very challenging space to maintain. But once the plant, once you've got your soil established and your plant's growing there, we amend it between every cycle, and then we also do take them out and rest. So then we remix and
retill and
all that soil once again, and then it can be used again. But those 75-litre bags, they're probably about on their 10th run at the moment. So they can actually sustain a very long time. So it's not that the soil, the nutrients depletes. You do need to feed the soil. You need to constantly feed it because, it's being taken from as well. But it's a balance, and it just needs to be managed like everything else.
No, it's not easy making good soil.
Oh, and, it's an art.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get my compost like quite right, and I'm like, I don't know how the farms do this at scale. Like, there's so much to it.
You try doing that on scale, it's tricky.
But it's interesting. As soon as you have good soil, you put a seed in, it's like, I'm doing nothing. Yeah. It's taking care of itself. Everything's healthy, and my tomatoes, like it's kind of crazy.
Nice.
When you buy like that big bag of soil from Bunnings and you're like, but there's sticks and twigs, and you're just like, that's not even soil. It's mostly just gravel.
Well, living soil is something that's very different from probably the bag that you've purchased from Bunnings.
That's exactly it. We've talked a little bit about cultivation techniques, but how do you guys plan to feed the plants? Is it any slow release fertilizers, mostly drip feed? Just had a few people asking like how you guys like to feed your plants, and even when you expand, how you plan to do it.
Yeah, so the living soil is done through dry amendments we actually feed them once during the cycle. We will amend the soil once, and then between cycles we give them quite a good amendment and dig that in. Outside the living soil, it's all through liquid drip irrigation. Yeah.
And then all your coils, obviously, your hydroponics.
Having a look at the buds, most of these you told us or all of them really were CBD and CBG.
Yep.
Have you had your buds tested? like in terms of lab results and things like that. You're growing outside. I'm curious, where are your percentages sitting? Like, everyone always cares about percentages. Me, not really. I'm more about what's that terpene and how is it expressing itself. But everyone's like, do you have the 30%? Do you have the 30%?
So currently we are all low THC. So we're currently operating under a hemp research license. So everything is low THC. We have some pretty rudimentary in-house cannabinoid testing equipment. So it gives us a yardstick, you know, oh, this one's a 16%, or this one's a 14%, or this one's 15. So yeah, our percentages of CBD range between say 18 to 14, that sort of area.
No, that's a nice place to be. I personally think there's a big shortage of CBD flower on the Australian market. The biggest issue I think for patients is price, right? Like, if I can get 10 grams of CBD flower from one brand, maybe it's like $130 to $150, but I can get 10 grams of THC flower for the same. It's pretty hard to get that CBD flower when I'm like, I know that the THC is going to give me instant and kind of more intense relief, I guess is how I'd put it. Meanwhile, there's a big part of me that would love to have kind of the European style where I can get like 30 grams of CBD flower for like $50, and then I can have that all day and night and just stay calm and relaxed. I think that's actually a great way to be. So my hope is for you guys to come in at a cheap price point for beautiful CBD, CBG flowers, and make that medicine accessible to patients, because at the moment it really is not even a little bit for that sort of stuff. THC stuff, I think that can like get patients by, but if you're wanting true CBD dosing, you can't really afford it unless you're going straight through oils.
Yeah, we probably do want to clarify that we've got our ODC license for high THC.
Oh yes,
and we are moving to high THC,
high THC
flower as well. But I think, and you know, I'm sure a lot of the listeners are educated to know that it's not just all about the THC, but for those who are just chasing the highest THC, you know, you really need to look a bit deeper into it. Look at the minor cannabinoids and terpene profiles, because you know you can go to the liquor store, and if you're turning around the bottles to look at what's got the highest alcohol content,
it's not really going to be your best alcohol. Like, yeah. Like,
so it's not about the experience. Whereas we know, you know, cannabis as a medicine is obviously very much about the therapeutic benefit. And you know, we do know that, you know, a lot of people are using cannabis recreationally, whether that's, you know, accessing it legally in different jurisdictions, or, you know, through the medical system here in Australia, because there is no alternative. You know, it is really about that experience. It's not just about lining the tequila shots up at the bar. It's you want to enjoy that, you know, that craft beer that comes from a microbrewery down the road. That's what we want with cannabis. We want, you know, we want Australian grown. We want to have those unique, you know, different strains grown close by. They're fresher, they're down the road. We support our Aussie farmers, and we know the story because we, you know, we want to know that it came from our backyard.
I tell you, something I've experienced a little more lately is once you know where your cannabis is coming from, it changes everything. I don't know, like, I've had cannabis that I thought I liked. It was nice. And then something happened where I have a bad association with that product. All of a sudden, I'm like, it's the same product, but I'm completely feeling a different way about it and how it interacts with me. And that was something I was thinking about. It's like the intent of who's helping grow that cannabis behind it and how much love's going into it. I think when you grow or produce something, you're always putting in a little bit of your own love. And if it's there and you're doing that, you know, the person on the other end gets to experience that bit of love. But if you're growing something on bulk and mass and purely profiteering, it might work, it might do its thing, but there is something there that just kind of doesn't sit. And I think that is actually what makes like brands and companies last for the long test of time. Like, it's often the person behind it just loved what they were putting together. And you just get a little piece of that when you get it. In terms of the farm and the scalability of the farm, you've got a lot of land. With this fundraise, how many tons were you looking to grow, hopefully?
So we've got 160 acres to expand into. Our stage 1 footprint is not much more than an acre. And out of that 1 acre, we can produce about 9.5 ton a year. So
that's a lot of cannabis that could be overall.
When you start scaling that, 100 acres, that's
a lot.
950 ton.
Could be the whole country's weed.
Yeah. Like it. I don't think space will ever be our limiting factor. So we've got more water than we'll ever need. We've got more space than we'll ever need. We've got as much light as anywhere I've seen. We've got all the ingredients here. We've got actually a supply for electricity for drying and everything, like commercial supply. So we've actually got all the ingredients to really have a substantial scale. But I'd like to go back to that, what you were saying before about how people put love into what it is that they do. And that's no more profound than in food. Like when something is made for $10 or something is made from your mum when you're not well. The difference, how your body responds to that, is immeasurable.
Yeah, mum's chicken noodle soup.
100%. And that carries through in everything on varying degrees. I used to create a range of products called flower essences, life essences. So I was extracting the energetic signature of flowers that I found in different parts of the world. And that's where you're really focusing on the higher frequencies, the more esoteric aspect of a material representation of a flower as such. So when you look at herbal medicine, you've got different aspects of herbal medicine. The flower is probably the highest aspect of the plant as such. And then that, once you go from the physical, then you start going into the aromatherapy aspect. And that's a higher frequency again. And then you go into the homeopathic representation of that flower. So there are all different aspects, different frequencies, different qualities of that particular flower. So with the flower that we're growing, what we're wanting to do is actually capture all those different aspects. And you can't do that you can do it indoors, but it's not such good quality. Whereas if you're starting to align with nature and you're starting to align with those higher frequencies, that higher expression of that particular part of nature, and it's unadulterated. Like that's where it starts to align with our own nature, and we start to come into a harmony. If we're just drugs, pharmaceuticals, chemicals,
yeah, we're just pumping it to its like biggest potential.
Yeah,
but then it lacks everything else.
Yeah,
It's
so
missing the love.
yeah, so what you're saying is, I think, quite profound, and it's often overlooked, but the intention behind why people do things is incredibly important and significant, I think.
I think so as well. One of my biggest arguments for home grow rights is the amount of love and care people will put into their plants. When anyone's like, oh, we don't know what the general public will do, they'll put toxins in it or like chemicals. I'm like, who would do that to their own plants? Like, this is for myself. Even if I was growing it for others, why would I do that to others? And what I come back to is like, in Parliament, what I think should happen is someone should bring in some tomatoes that are like homegrown and then just some like salad tomatoes from Coles or Woolies and be like, you tell me which you think is better and why. And you'll be like, well, the home grow is obviously juicier, tastier, sweeter, like in every aspect, and it's just better. And it's the same with cannabis to me. I don't think it's not easy to grow good cannabis. We know this. Some people are a little ignorant to that. Beautiful birds. It's not easy to grow beautiful cannabis, and it would take maybe trial and error for a lot of people. But once they, maybe did 2-3 grows, they'd probably be like, oh, I've learnt my mistakes. Now I've got something. And they've put so much love and dedication into that one or a couple plants that the way they perceive it when they get it back into them is completely a different experience. And it's just, to me, crazy. We prescribe for anxiety and depression. Growing plants is known to help cure anxiety and depression. And we're like, don't do that though. Don't do that. Don't even think about it. And that's something that gets really, it just riles me up. I want to talk a little bit about the advocacy side just for a moment. Obviously, we've got a few big challenges in this country on the advocacy side. We've got the driving laws. That's probably one of the biggest factors. Patients are just being criminalized for being patients. That kind of sucks considering no other patients are. And then obviously we've still got like the general prohibition side where we haven't got a recreational space and it's all under a Schedule 8 medication. Where do you guys see the People's Plant fitting into the efforts to help break destigmatization or help with any of these things? Do you have any initiatives that you're planning or looking to do?
Maybe Emily, you're better suited to answer this.
Yeah, look, there's so much work to be done, and that's why we encourage everybody to join the conversation. We need, we've come a long way, but there's so far to go, to remove all this misinformation. It's like 80 years of misinformation. We need to remove the stigma. We need to normalize cannabis as a medicine, but also just as a plant. It's, it is a little bit ridiculous, the regulations that we've got, but obviously we're working within the bounds of the current regulations. But we would like to see the scheduling of cannabis change so that it is easier to get CBD and THC. But we would love to see people be able to grow their own medicine. You touched on it before, the opportunity for healing and connection in growing a cannabis plant is like it's almost impossible to measure. But we know when we look at people and gardening, it helps with depression, anxiety, and other things. And it literally puts us in touch and helps ground ourselves. Now, that's not just hippie stuff. They've done trials that show, that growing plants in general helps. I've got a horticultural background. A lot of people I know found their love of plants from growing cannabis when they were a teenager.
I don't think I would remotely care for plants the same way I do if I didn't have cannabis. Like, it just wasn't there until I found cannabis.
And so despite cannabis being illegal and being prohibited, almost all around the world, people have still, made connections with this plant, whether it was just growing it or consuming it. And, and we want to return cannabis to the people. So at the moment we've got this, I used to call it a med rec market here in Australia. It's becoming a rec med market. Someone corrected me the other day. Now I'm all for people having legal access to cannabis. I think, if we're considered responsible adults to consume alcohol and cigarettes, that we know cigarettes are killing us. It tells us on the packet.
We're allowed to gamble and we're allowed to drink at the same damn time. And you're telling me I can't sit at home and smoke a little bit of weed.
Yeah, so I think we've got it all around the wrong way. There's some fantastic research that was done in the UK by Professor David Nutt back in 2010 with some of his colleagues that looked at drug harm scores. And, of no surprise to me, but perhaps a surprise to some of your listeners, alcohol is the number one most harmful drug to the individual who consumes and the community around them. You then come down the list and it's like cocaine, methamphetamines. Tobacco, I think, sits around 6th position. And then you come further down and it's cannabis, and you go all the way down to the other end and you got your psychedelics. So we've kind of had it prohibition around the wrong way, in my opinion. But so if we're considered, responsible adults to be able to consume tobacco and alcohol, I don't see why we can't have the same for cannabis. I do think patients need to be looked after first and foremost. But, we've got great patient access now in Australia. It is quite easy for most people to get access. So I think we now need to look at, our more recreational users also not being criminals, because it shouldn't be a crime to feel good. Like, we live pretty stressful lives. We're allowed to go and have a knockoff drink at the end of the day. Why can't those who choose actually be able to consume cannabis? So we're looking at, what we can do to help reschedule THC and CBD, but also, look at this recreational market, or what I like to call an adult use market, because there's a huge gray area between, predominantly pure recreational use and self-medicating. So I think there's a big grey area there. But you touched on the drive change movement, and that's a huge issue here in Australia, where, cannabis patients are being discriminated against. You don't have roadside drug tests for opioids or benzos. And look, I'm all for safety on the roads. But in the end, the roadside drug tests for cannabis don't test if you're under the influence. They test if you have a presence. And that's not, that doesn't sit right with me, because we're not doing that with any of the other pharmaceutical drugs. So I think if you're not under the influence, and it's not affecting your driving, you should be treated just like any other patient who's taking a medicine. Because, if on your benzos and your opioid medicines, it says, if affected, do not drive. Whereas cannabis, you're basically told you can't drive if you're taking cannabis, even if you're not feeling the effects or under the influence of it anymore. You had it the day before. You're still told by your doctor you shouldn't be driving, and that's not okay. We really need an overhaul. So if you're not part of the movement, look up Drive Change.
Drive Change is a good one.
Because it's really affecting, there's patients who choose not to take cannabis at all because they need to drive. Then you've got people who just run the gauntlet and risk, really damaging their home environment. If they're the breadwinner, if they've got a family and then they lose their license, that really doesn't sit well with me at all.
No, that's it's a real problem that there is that discrimination, and it seems to me like it's almost like incentivized. Like, that's how they're still keeping the prohibition existing, which is I don't know. It feels very frustrating here as a normal member of society, just being a normal person and going, No, you can't have that one freedom. You just cannot have it, which is a frustrating thing. So I think these laws will change over time. I don't know if we'll ever really be able to test for impairment. And one of the biggest issues we've got is if we went to like judgment on like a police officer, I think the public wouldn't be comfortable with that because there's already a distrust. So it becomes a matter of how we're going to figure this out. And I think the medical reasoning is a pretty strong one. If we're able to drive on opiates or even stimulants, I was thinking about this while you were talking, there is nothing to stop someone who is prescribed ADHD medication from taking triple their dose. And that becomes a pretty strong party drug, like almost cocaine level sorts of amphetamines and stimulating. Why are they able to go for a drive all of a sudden? Like they'd be able to get on the road and be literally speeding in their mind and being like, yeah, I'm a safe driver. The abuse is everywhere. So there are tests that like do work and test for impairment, but they're all a little too vague. It's not a number, right? Like it's not me blowing out my blood alcohol level out of my breath. Yeah. It's not my cannabis breath, you know?
It doesn't work the same way, you know, and
that's the problem.
Whether fortunately or unfortunately, it's not a linear effect like we have with the blood alcohol readings. So we need a different way. And it's not good enough to just say, well, we don't have another way yet, so we'll stick with this one we know discriminates. Against patients. Because it also was the extra thing I want to add. It's also really hindering our research trials here in Australia, because anyone who wants to sign up for that research trial, that clinical trial, has to stop driving, and then they're like, well, I can't because I've got to drive to work, I've got to pick the kids up. Yeah. And so we're seeing really big issues in recruitment in our clinical trials here in Australia. And you've got one side of the industry saying we need more research, but it's being hindered by these ridiculous drug driving laws.
If I could just add a little bit about the homegrown. We're not threatened by the homegrown. Sure. I think it's something that we really want to support. As Emily said, when people grow at home, it's a healing process in itself. I think we want to really support that.
I think one of the ways farms could support that is imagine being able to sell your genetics to the patients. Because then they could have what the doctors even prescribed them, you know, and it's aligned, and then all of a sudden they're growing that same thing in their own care and it's not costing them an arm and a leg. Certainly, seems like a beautiful way to do it.
When we're able to, that is our intent. Yeah. Yep.
I just want to get a little bit about like your pest management. I've had a lot of people asking, like, because you're outdoors, how are you guys managing pests? What have you learned over these like 5 or 6 years in terms of just making sure your crops stay healthy?
Caterpillars are bastards.
Don't trust Mr. Caterpillar.
Caterpillars are terrible. So what we are doing is we are going to create an insect exclusion netting that covers the outdoor flowering area, because no chemicals are allowed whatsoever. You just need to remove them from the equation. Little tiny aphids, all those sorts of things, spider mites, we've found are very easy to control through IPM management. It's just the caterpillars. Caterpillars are like, but they're big. So it's actually easy to exclude those guys. So the IPM is actually nowhere near as challenging as you might imagine, particularly outdoors. Outdoors is actually, we found, it has its own balance. Nature, again, you create your own little environment indoors, and once it goes out of balance, it can go out of balance really far, really quick. Whereas there's all these self-regulating aspects of nature. Winter, summer, night, day, cold. It actually regulates itself.
I see a lot of like companion planting. I notice like every organic farm is generally doing that sort of thing, which is nice. You see other kinds of flowers amongst your other flowers.
Yeah. They're indicator species. So if there's certain pests that are in the crop, they'll be concentrated on eggplants or certain other varieties that we've got in there for different pests. They're sacrificial anodes.
And how about like controlling the humidity? I mean, we're in Queensland. It's kind of ridiculous here. One day it's freezing, the next day it's hot, and the next day it's raining, storming. Like, so Queensland.
Humidity is awesome. You got to love it. You can't fight it. So it all comes back to genetics. Cannabis grows very well in very, very tropical environments. It also grows very well in very dry environments. So it's about finding the right genetics, and it's also about picking the right time of year. So our winters here are often quite dry.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll get this absolutely gorgeous time of the year for about 5 to 7 months where the flowers can be grown in a way that can be quite tight. So it'll be very similar to what people expect from an indoor grow. Whereas in summer, it starts heating up. As you said, it gets a bit more humid. So that might be more suitable for a flower that's quite big and open. And that's more suitable for washing or extraction. So it's picking the genetics for the times of the year is particularly critical. So a big part of our process will be washing the flowers to get the trichomes off. And there's certain times of the year that you do certain things. So you're working with nature. You're not fighting it,
Do you plan to have supplemental lighting when you have the greenhouses set up, or?
Yeah. So for vegetation, we will be putting in supplemental lighting, and that gives us the perpetual
18
harvest
hours.
capacity.
Yeah.
The plants don't require as much light in veg, and it will be in a greenhouse. So it's just extending the day length. So we're trying to absolutely make it as efficient as possible, and it works twofold: economically and environmentally. So generally, if it's environmentally friendly, it's often economically friendly as well. So it works hand in hand. So it's a bit of a no-brainer.
Just a few quick ones regarding like a GMP certification. Are you looking to have GMP facilities on site for extracts, or?
So certainly our stage one, we won't have GMP on site. We'll be working with, we've got a few partners that we'll work with, and the product will be finished in a GMP facility so that it's a pharmaceutical quality product. Where we have plans in stage 2, it depends how the market evolves. Whereas we may go heavy into beverages, we may go heavy into edibles or topicals. And in that scenario, we may have a part of our facility that is GMP. But I know some facilities are trying to do the entire thing in GMP, and it just appears to me to be a massive expense, unnecessary, and environmentally catastrophic. Like the amount of electricity that's used is just
It's a lot.
Ridiculous.
With your mention of the topicals, it just got me thinking of you as a herbalist. The topicals get you really excited. And have you thought about ever combining other herbs and medicines in with the THC, CBD, CBN, and making, balms and other kinds of things? Like, I want the cayenne pepper CBD, put it on me. Like,
good question. So in herbalism, it's very, very, very rare you would ever prescribe a single herb by itself. Like that's
it's like
really
stacks,
rare.
Really.
Yeah. Well, the sum of the parts is greater than the parts separate. I didn't quite get that one right, but you understand what I'm saying. So I don't believe it's legally possible in Australia at this point in time. You would need to have a formulation, and then you would have your cannabis, and then the person would need to take them both at the same time. When the regulations allow, you would formulate you would just incorporate it into a herbal dispensary, and you would have, we normally work with 300 or 400 herbs, and it would just be one of 300 or 400 herbs, and it has a place. It has a very important place, but it, generally speaking, from a herbalist perspective, it doesn't stand alone. No.
It would be interesting to have a bunch of herbs and cannabis just being like a small little part of that, not really the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's where cannabis started. So because cannabis before Prohibition, got brought into Western medicine in the 1840s, and you can look it up. There were different, elixirs and tinctures that weren't just cannabis. Like it was in combination, with other plant medicines. We just lost all that, and then we really. It's so unfortunate that we've taken this. Such a sidestep into this pharmaceutical, and I think everyone forgets it's a herb, it's a plant. It's a real pharmaceutical disruptor. It doesn't work the way our modern pharmaceuticals work, which is where we generally find something in nature that, that has an effect that we've used for a long time. Then we isolate, the active, we synthesize it, we put it in a pill, in a blister pack. We've got, our gold standard, randomized controlled trials, and then it's brought to the patient, whereas cannabis is a ground up movement and it doesn't fit that paradigm. because when we've isolated THC and CBD, the trials show it doesn't work as well as the whole plant medicine. When we've synthesized it, we've had catastrophic effects. And I love that. I love Mother Nature fighting back and the cannabis plant going, no, thank you.
No, it's not
It's actually whole plant is the way to go. Yeah. And that then becomes really tricky for our Western medical system. But we need to keep coming back to, I find it funny that it's, considered a pharmaceutical. We've got dried herbs and tinctures. And this is what, 2024? That's not a pharmaceutical. There are opportunities, and I really don't think we've even begun to scratch the surface with cannabis and its, real medical potential. And I think because we've got such a booming industry right now with flower and tinctures, and we're starting to see gummies and things, but because the patient pays, as soon as you start to look at doing anything more than the dried flower and a tincture, that's already quite unaffordable to most Australians, especially when you look at, different conditions requiring a high dose. I had someone telling me the other day, that their gummies, when they worked it out, they basically cost $5 each.
Yeah, it's pricey.
And they're taking a couple of gummies throughout the day for their condition, and then they're they're supplementing with vaping during the day when they need the breakthrough treatment. And, all of a sudden they're spending, between $20 and $50 a day. Now, how many people can afford that? Sure, some patients are on, what might be the cost of a cup of coffee a day. But even that, the cost of living is ridiculous, and our medicines should be subsidized.
Yeah, the fact that we're using it as a medicine and there's no subsidies and we all pay our taxes, and this is probably one of the cheaper medicines to produce, realistically, because we're not having to really break down much of it at all. Something that I had come across is I saw some pharmacists talking about how cannabis is so much stronger these days, and that's maybe some of the problems with it. And I'm like, you guys are pharmacists. You do know a lot of your drugs come from other plants, and what they've done is selectively bred them to just get that tiny little molecule from 0.1% to 0.2%. That you've done the same thing. We're just doing it a little more efficiently. We got from 5% to 30. And all we're doing is just making it a more concentrated method, so we don't need to consume as much or make as much. One plant can maybe service a whole patient rather than needing 5 plants. So for me, something that I think the traditional pharmaceutical model gets wrong is this idea that strong cannabis is bad. I'm like, you've just made it easier and more consumable for the patient, really. And that's where I think a lot of the extracts are starting to sit in, and we're still really scratching the surface here of extracts in Australia. And I saw you guys are looking to do solventless extracts, and that's missing here. Can you explain what solventless extracts are to the broader community and why you think they could be quite important to the patients?
Yeah, sure. So it's all in the name, solvent or solventless. So pretty much there might be a small amount of solventless on the market, but
very small.
It's all solvent based. So the name itself, solvent, it dissolves the active constituents in the herb and transports them into another format. So if you've got all your little trichomes sitting there, then you melt them with butane or alcohol or supercritical carbon dioxide or all these solvent methods. The process of dissolving them actually damages or changes or denatures the actual actives. What we're wanting to achieve here is a mechanical extraction process using temperature and agitation. So we're actually farming trichomes, we're farming cannabinoids, and the solventless extraction process is a process where we're cooling it right down so that they become brittle. It's like a little mushroom-shaped gland that covers the flower, and through agitation in water, they break off, and then we collect them, and then we will dry them out, and then that trichome is actually the concentrated form of the active constituent of the flower. So all your THC and your CBD. What we can then do is, using a rosin press, we can start to squash those little mushrooms and squeeze the juice out. And we're collecting just the resin or the rosin inside those trichomes. And that's where we start to get into a very, very, very pure form of therapeutic. So why is that important? It means that you can get what would be a dose for a person, it might be a 0.5 gram dose, is what someone needs to inhale. It might be reduced to a minuscule amount. So maybe the damaging aspect of inhaling either the vape or the smoke is reduced significantly. Simply you're just concentrating it. So your requirements to get your therapeutic action is much, much smaller. So it's a very efficient model. Why we're into the solventless model is it's the closest representation you can get to the actual whole plant extract. It's not denatured in any way. It's a representation of the plant. And that's what we're wanting to achieve. We actually want to achieve that when you're able to consume one of our extracts, you'll be able to hear the birds flying over the crop as it grows. You know, that's the level of quality we're wanting to achieve.
You were telling me a little bit about the sonic flowering. Could you tell the audience a little bit about this? Because this blew my mind.
There's lots of esoteric aspects that I've always been quite curious about. Radionics, and this particular one was sonic bloom. So sonic bloom was something that was created maybe 40 years ago, where they're using, when nature wakes up in the morning, there's all the birds get in there and start singing, woohoo, we're here, we're ready for the day. And that chorus, that morning chorus, wakes up the whole forest. And that waking up of the forest, it's funny, all the little stomata, all the little pores on the plant open up. So what they realized, this is 30, 40 years ago, if they capture that frequency of the morning chorus of all the birds singing in the morning, and they capture that frequency, and then they play it on the crop, it opens the stomata up. So they're actually able to grow faster and yield heavier plants by playing this particular frequency. We're currently not doing that, but there's different ways of working with nature to
Get the results you're kind of chasing.
Yeah, to support the plant's growth.
That's really like quite interesting to me. I think a lot of people know the classic, you play like nice, polite, classical music, plants tend to thrive. And if you play really aggressive stuff, you get a little more sad and depressive. And I'm like, these are living, conscious beings. They just don't talk to us, at least through human words.
There might be some people who disagree with you on that one.
Even I disagree with me on that one. I was in Amsterdam and
They spoke to you?
I talked to some big oak trees.
Yeah.
They were like the Lord of the Rings Ents. Like they fully spoke to me and they're like, you're going to do cannabis. And I was like, okay, I will.
I think it's really important that we try and, bring it back, to nature.
Yeah.
Like humans and cannabis have had such a long symbiotic relationship. We've evolved with cannabis. It is an amazing plant. Like when you talk to all different people, like I'm just amazed at how people's face just light up when they want to tell me a story, whether it's a legal story or not, but it's actually exciting to see that. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I want my food and my medicine, kissed by the sun. I don't, if I've got a choice, I don't want it grown, in indoors or in basements. And we've had an illicit market. It had to go indoors. It had to go underground. And there are some benefits, and there will always be people where that's their preference, but we want to give people a choice.
Yeah.
And, I think these girls behind me are a lot happier sitting in the sun, listening to the birds in the morning.
Something that's interesting to me about like cannabis going underground and all of that, like having to be underground. It's funny here in Australia, while that's true, we actually had an incredible outdoor, because we have so much land and so many people growing it outdoors across the whole country. We got to experience outdoor growing cannabis. A lot of the world I don't think did. And I think that's where, like, when you think about like Canada and the US, obviously they went into their basements and they did all that intense growing. They, I think, have that preference because that's what they've always known. Where over here, we experience a beautiful light outdoor. And I've talked to some older folks that, came around cannabis where they experienced when hydro came in. And they were like, oh, hydro's the skit stuff. And it's like, where did that come from? Well, because it really kind of was. And then they would have outdoor grown stuff from, the northern rivers, the kind of Mullumbimby, Nimbin sort of experience. And they're like, oh, this is nice and lovely. And it was always the question of what's different? Same plant, different results. Something that I would like to see you guys do as a documentary for me, really, Your 5 growing methods, same genetics. I want to see all 5 and how they look and how they smell and everything. That would be an incredible way to just see the expression of the plant, you know, especially if they were all grown outside, apart, you know, the one that was the indoor, but see the difference between the salts, the organics, the living soil, just slight differences, and then leave it up to people to kind of judge on that. I think that would be, I don't know, that's a cannabis nerd's dream to see something like that.
We've done that. and certain plants will prefer an indoor environment, certain plants will prefer outdoors. One thing that struck me was the actual medium that you grow in has a profound effect of the flowers as well. If you want golf balls for buds, you grow indoors with rock wool, and you'll get these golf balls. It doesn't look, you know, it's the magical bag appeal that a lot of the people are looking for, but is it good medicine? Is that what you're chasing? The aesthetics?
Some people, right? Like some people just want something that looks beautiful. Like at the same way, I want my table of bouquet of flowers to look nice. I want my weed to look nice. It's a bit of a flex if you have a beautiful bunch of flowers versus, oh, these are okay.
Yeah.
But, you know, the time and place, I suppose.
You don't want to judge a book by its cover, though. You
Never.
know, like it's really about that therapeutic effect.
Yeah.
And how that works for you.
Yeah.
Something that I was thinking about there is the Canadian exports. A lot of people are like putting, you know, Canadian flower. It's peak of the mountain. They know what they're doing. They've cracked it. They know how to get this 35%. Hello, puppy. People have figured out, you know, these really intense expressions of cannabis overseas, and they're bringing it over here. And now it's set a bit of a standard on the patients to be like, that's what I expect. Nothing but the best. Do you guys want to even try and compete with this craft cannabis from Canada? Do you see a place for you guys to do that kind of experience here? Or are you really more about, we want to make this really viable for the people? And the craft stuff, while it is nice, maybe it's not really what's needed for the patient in the end, where that's more on the recreational side.
Yeah, we will have different lines targeting different sort of groups or market segments or patient requirements. I think probably where the market really is missing, what's really missing from the market at the moment is just really good, clean, quality, outdoor, affordable product. Like that is what's missing. Sure, they've got a ton of high quality indoor Canadian product on the market. We don't really need more of that.
Yeah, there's plenty of it.
There's plenty of it.
Yep.
And that's not the only option. I think there is probably a fairly vocal but small part of the patient group that lauds that as the best of the best. Whereas there's a very, very, very large segment of the patient population that really aren't interested in that.
Yes, I would agree.
And that's what we're wanting to do. We will probably provide a product that will work for those people as well. Well, we will provide a product that will resonate with that patient.
The connoisseur grade is kind of what I call them. The connoisseur patient, they want nothing but like the most meticulous looked after plants.
But I think that'll be the bulk of it. Will be very clean, affordable, high quality outdoor product. But then when we start moving into the extract segment, then we all of a sudden jump to top shelf again, where we'll be able to do live rosin, fresh frozen live rosin. All your waxes, your butters, your jams.
We're
your
excited
sauces,
for your hash. I'm
stuff.
already there. I think like Australia as a whole doesn't know what's coming in regards to hash. It's like such an unknown thing here. Like people have had it in drips and drabs, maybe through friends in the illicit market. But when you actually have high quality concentrates, regular, accessible, it changes everything.
Changes the game. Yeah. So that will be part of what's coming.
Your strategy. All right. I think
to put it in context, we'll be able to produce probably about 12 kilo blocks of bubble hash every 2 weeks in our stage 1. That's crazy.
So
that's a lot of doses.
Yeah, there's a lot of doses. Yeah, so that's sort of the volumes that we'll be working with in our stage 1.
Your proprietary Opti-Grow model, what is it?
So that was a term that was coined by one of the other founders. So basically, it's having a perpetual model outdoors. So we're able to harvest outdoors all year round.
Yeah.
So it is latitude dependent. There's only certain parts of the world that you're able to do that in. It's certainly not a new technique, but I've never seen it commercially done. I've seen it done on small scales a lot, but never on a proper commercial big
What are the
scale.
big challenges of doing it on a big commercial? Like what changes?
Well, most people want to have predictability, and when you have weather as an element, it's a little bit hard.
That makes sense.
So we need to have a number of different ways of dealing with different weather situations, and we have a resource available to us that has given us, okay, if these certain weather events are predicted in the next week, this is what we'll do. We will always have 4 crops in the field at any one time, and it's like, okay, well, we can harvest early and then wash it, or we can do, we'll be freezing some, we'll be washing some straight fresh.
That's really cool. It seems like you're really then in touch with the land.
It's connected.
Yeah, like you're trying to actually judge the weather more by what's actually going on rather than what the weatherman's telling you.
Oh yeah. yeah. He doesn't always get it right.
The birds are always like the big indicator of what's about to come. Like, oh, storms are coming. Like I've just saw the cockatoos coming through. You're like, something's out there.
Yeah.
So that's cool. I really like that.
Farming's an art form, and when you go inside, you play God and you remove, you remove any of the natural elements. Whereas we'll have the ability to do that. But really, this is what excites us. It's being in touch with nature and having the medicine grown outdoors. And what that does is it significantly reduces your capital costs.
Not paying for
your
lights.
your OPEX costs, and then that all of a sudden, becomes affordable medicine because we don't have all those overheads that everybody else has. Yes, there's some added risk, but we're also taking some, a lot of the elements from
you also have
protected
more
cropping.
land, like you can produce a little more and then that covers your loss. Like illicit growers knew that a long time. They grow out in the bush and they'll lose more than half their crop, but they know if they plant enough, they'll keep enough of it.
That's right. So part of our modelling is that 20% is just off the table.
Yeah, of course.
And you'd be devastated if you're paying for the environment.
Yeah.
With all the environmental controls. Oh my God, you lost 20%. The sun's
Here
free.
it's expected.
Yeah, it's just part of the deal. So it's part of our modelling.
How much of the company is going to be available for purchase in stage 1, roughly?
Exactly, we're not sure yet. That comes out in the offer document, and that's currently getting worked right now as we speak, and it'll sort of come out as the offer goes live.
All right. So by the time this is live, that will probably be about the same sort of time.
Yeah.
So that'll be cool.
You want to hit that expression of interest button so that you can get supplied that offer document.
That's it. Do you expect to have dividends for the investors within some sort of time frame?
Yeah, so all the shares are ordinary shares. So the same as me, same as Emily, same as everyone. And the intention is that we will be a very profitable business as well. That those dividends will get paid out. That's how everyone will be remunerated for their efforts and their investment.
Yeah. I guess let's go just quickly into the rewards for like different tiers of investment. So if we throw in $500, etc., what are we getting? Other than obviously a piece of the beautiful land in a sense, or the company, but I know you guys have some pretty cool exclusives.
Yeah, look, there's a different range of rewards depending on what tier that you come in. So you can come and, join the People's Plant and become part of the family for as little as $250. And obviously the higher that investment is, the more grateful, we really are for you, to be joining us. And so we've got more to give back. So, we're going to be providing everybody with updates of what we're doing here when it comes to, constructing the next stage. We've got virtual farm tours. We've got in-person farm tours. We've got a little bit of merch, but we've also got some different People's Plant programs where people who are qualified medicinal cannabis patients will be able to get, be part of different programs to get discounts off their medicines. Obviously, it doesn't go through us. It's still got to go through your
pharmacy
doctor,
and doctor.
with the current regulations. But we want to be able to offer those rewards back to those who have supported us. And then we've got opportunities, to be part of strain naming competitions. What have I missed, Ben?
We want a bit of fun
reviews.
involved in it. Reviews, there will be, for the top tier, there will be an opportunity where they'll be in a program for reviewing some of the products that are coming out. And you'll get a heads up on anything that we're working on.
You're working on. No, that's exciting. It's nice to be able to be a little involved for literally cheaper than a price of a bag of weed. You can own a piece of a cannabis company for less than an ounce, realistically. Like $250 ounce, that's like on the cheaper side. So we're not doing too bad there. Like, that's a good investment, guys. Like, think about it. Just skip your next bag and buy a piece of a farm.
So some of those incentives, we want to get that price point down to like $100 for Oz. You know?
No, that's like, I think that's the big dream. I'm a big proponent of Michael Boulderstone from the Hemp Embassy. $1 a gram, shouldn't be more. And I'm like, you know what, Michael, you are right. Give me $1 a gram.
It's a herb, it's a plant.
Yeah. Just want to get a little bit about the team. I know Rebecca couldn't be here today, but Rebecca's a big co-founder with you, your sister. I'd just like to know a little bit about the team structure, how and who's doing what, and who you have already on board, and what you're looking to maybe bring in as well as funding comes in.
Yeah, okay. So I started the whole adventure, and I was able to talk my sister into joining us. It took about a year or so. And then we approached my cousin Tim, and he embarked on this journey with us. So there was the three founders, my sister, myself, and my cousin. And it was just the three of us for quite some time. And then we started doing our trials. We brought on an agronomist and a plant breeder, a specialist in plant breeding. So they've been with us for getting on to 4 years now. Those two.
Almost the beginning.
Yeah, they're very close to the start. We've got some, like, there's a few other members that are sort of more around actual handy. Like, we need more building to be done than growing at this point in time. So there's two staff members that are really practical people. And Emily, of course, has come on as our COO, our Chief Operating Officer.
So, I like to say words.
Very cool. Yeah. What we will do as time passes and we get more funding on and we start to grow, initially we're going to be all about building. We've got to build a facility. Once the facility's built, then we're going to need a lot of hands to help. So growers, there'll be curating for post-harvest activities. Then there'll be specialists in the extraction realm, and probably packaging, logistics, quality control. You probably have a whole list of people.
Oh, that we need. Even when it comes to the compliance side of things, there's
a lot of roles.
There's some glamorous and not so glamorous jobs in this industry, and there's a lot of hands-on crop work when it comes to cannabis.
In terms of crop work, for most patients, most cannabis people, they all want to be on a farm doing something, and it's not as easy as it sounds, and it's not nearly as glamorous as you'd hope, and it normally doesn't reward you really well either, other than the time with the plants. What advice do you have for people, one, who are looking for jobs in this industry, and two, really do you have preference to put cannabis people in, or are you more preferencing plant people?
Look, I think, go out and get commercial crop experience, particularly under some form of protected cropping generally. So that's just not your broadacre outdoor. That can be in a greenhouse or indoor. Because while it's great if people have had experience with the cannabis plant, please don't tell me if it wasn't legal experience, because you've got to be fit and proper to come and work at a cannabis farm. So please don't put your foot in it. But really, one of the things that I'm more interested in is that you've got commercial horticultural production experience. Because if you've got experience with cannabis and maybe you've grown, a handful or a dozen or even 100, how do you handle thousands? How do you handle, dealing with the different climatic conditions? How do you handle that perpetual harvest? And when you've got a small tent somewhere and you're able to, talk to each girl and, tuck them in at night, we don't quite have that opportunity here because we're working on mass scale. So I would recommend getting, production horticulture experience. If you can get, cannabis experience that you can put on your resume, then that is obviously fantastic. Join different interest groups. We've got a Australian Cannabis Cultivators.
I was going to ask you a bit about is it an association, a union?
Yeah.
How do you frame it?
So it's an industry association. So the Australian Cannabis Cultivators, I founded last year under the Australian Medicinal Cannabis Association. So it's not very expensive to become a member of AMCA, the Australian Medicinal Cannabis Association. And then that gives you complimentary membership of the Australian Cannabis Cultivators that sits under AMCA. Now that's for cannabis growers and researchers. So it's not for doctors. It's not for pharmacists. It's really for us to talk about growing. We have monthly meetings where we have different guest speakers come in and talk about interest topics. But probably most excitingly, one of the new things that we're offering as under Australian Cannabis Cultivators is what I believe is the first full day cannabis cultivation training day as a shoulder event to UIC in 2025.
Oh, that's exciting.
So if you haven't heard of United in Compassion and the UIC conference, you must have been living under a rock.
It's a big one.
So look it up. It's in Brisbane in February, and we will have our first Australian Cannabis Cultivators training day. Obviously, we won't be able to touch the plants because they're heavily restricted, so we can't bring them to Brisbane with us. But we'll have a whole team of experts coming to teach from novice growers to the more experienced. There'll be something for everybody.
That's really exciting. UIC isn't a cheap event, but if you're really wanting to get a foothold in the industry, it's probably one you'd want to spend the money to be around because you'll be in the room with, basically everyone in the entire industry, from the regulators all the way to the clinics, all the way to the suppliers and the farmers. More or less, everyone's probably there. Full weekend pass is probably like $1,200 to $1,500 if you're a regular member of the public. Yep. So it's a pricey one to get to, but if you're really looking for those opportunities, it's a good place to be.
Yeah, networking. It's key.
Yeah.
But the cannabis training day is a lot more affordable. So if you're not interested in the whole event or that's going to break the budget, can't remember off the top of my head, but if you get some of the early bird rates, and especially if you're a member of AMCA or ACC, then I think it's under $400 if you take advantage. So that's pretty.
If you're wanting to be a grower, you want to probably do that. I saw maybe a year or two ago, I was Googling cannabis cultivation, and I found there's a TAFE certificate that's being drafted up. I don't know if any TAFE's actually onboarded it yet, but having an actual specialization in cannabis production.
It's a Cert 4. So I was actually involved in developing that. It was seen as an area of need, and gosh, it might have been 5 years ago. And I'm trying to remember which TAFE has picked it up, but it's not actually available to everybody, and I don't want to say the wrong one. But if you do look it up, it is cannabis cultivation and production. I think it's a Cert 3 and Cert 4,
I think,
off the top of my head. And it's really in that pilot stage, and it's only going to be offered to people already in the industry, which really doesn't help people who want to get in.
But I think it's something's being worked on, and I think that's the important thing. In 5 years, man, when you're leaving school, you're like, what do you want to do? I'm going to go to TAFE to learn to grow weed. I think that will be an opportunity, which I think is really exciting. And trying to maybe make it a little more accessible so you don't have to go to university to get that is so important because I love uni. I went to uni. Actually, I didn't love uni. It was okay. But more, I went to TAFE as well. And the practical hands-on skills you get from a TAFE is so much more than I got at uni in terms of what I do. And I'm on computers. And I can imagine with the plant, being at a plant is probably going to teach you a lot more than someone in a lecture hall telling you about a plant.
Yeah, so, you definitely don't have to go to university if you're interested in being a grower.
Yeah.
So, there's lots of production horticulture, certificates at TAFE. It's more about getting hands-on growing experience, and it doesn't have to be cannabis.
Commercial big plants
quite easy to teach a new crop once you've got the foundation of understanding
how a farm runs.
Nutrients, climate, irrigation, pest and disease management, because as we touched on before, we use integrated pest and disease management here, so it's like understanding the foundation of cultivation and then just adding that plant that you absolutely love on top of it.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yep, that's what we're looking for.
And then I guess we'll just go into the last few questions that I have for you. Have you guys done any other previous fundraising or startups? Like, where does your business acumen skills kind of come from to be confident enough to pull this off?
Yeah, okay. So between the three founders, myself, I've ran a number of businesses. I've made naturopathic products before and taken them throughout Europe and the States. So I've sort of been into international distribution chains. After that, I established and ran a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center. So they're both small businesses compared to the capacity of what this is. And that's where my cousin Tim gets involved. He manufactured clothing for Lorna Jane. So he had a factory in China. I think he had 1,200 employees or something of that nature. So he started that from scratch, scaled it to a very significant size, and then sold it on. So he has more that big end of town skill capacity. And my sister is very, very capable of doing all the HR, the regulatory environment, all the bits in between, which is very significant in this industry.
Yeah,
it's a massive role that she plays.
Yeah, it's the painful work.
Yeah.
Someone's got to cop it.
I take my hat off to her. She does an amazing job.
How do people invest, and how can people really just get more involved and learn about you?
Yeah, how do people invest? So it's on the Birchall website. Yep. Yeah, so we're the People's Plant on the Birchall's website. There's probably ads. If you talk too close to your phone about the People's Plant, you'll probably get an ad about the People's Plant.
It happens.
Don't know how, but it does.
Magic.
Yeah, you just follow the link. So the People's Plant. The offer goes live next week. Nobody is able to invest until such time as the offer goes live. Once it goes live, if you're interested, you'll be able to receive what that offer actually is. So each share will be $1 each. So if you buy $250 worth of shares, you'll get 250 ordinary shares. Or you might get $100,000, 100,000 shares. It's up to you.
Pretty straightforward.
It's actually a pretty straightforward process.
Yeah, I've bought shares on Birchall before. It went bust, but COVID happened and it was a music company, so
bugger.
That's all right.
Yep.
They were trying to sell leftover gig tickets at the end of before a gig was going live. If there was like a small pool, they would be sold for a cheaper amount to the members of this community. And I was like, I'm about that. That makes sense. You're just selling excess for cheaper. I'll do it. And COVID happened and everything just shut down. And they were like, how do we afford to run?
Yeah. Yeah. So
but
life happens sometimes.
It's a cool platform to be able to get people involved and actually have a piece. I think there was such a big start in the 2010s for Kickstarter, right? And it's kind of weird. It was like, hey, buy our product and give us all this money and hopefully we'll give you a good product, but you're not going to get a piece of this product in the development of the ownership of it. And I think Birchall type platforms for actual investment rounds made a lot more sense. It's like, well, if I'm giving you money for the product, I'd probably want to get a bit of my investment back on that because I have no idea if you're going to pull anything off.
Yeah.
It's definitely a vaporizer that I've been scammed with on Kickstarter that I think about to this day. It was just rubbish. It combusted. And you're like, what do you mean? I gave you so much money.
I think it really suits our campaign and our ethos and what we stand for, because it is the people's plant. We want the people to come on the journey with us. We want you to join the family. And help us on this journey because who knows where we're going to be in the next 8 years. I can't believe how much has changed since legalization.
Could be illegal again for all we know. Hope not. But
let's not go
let's
backwards.
not go down there.
Don't even say that.
But yeah, we've seen a lot of successful crowdfunding for cannabis companies. I've been involved in some myself in the past and involved in startups. So in cannabis here in Australia as well as overseas, and they're all doing really well. So, it can be done if you're wise with the money, and we've got a lot of family and personal investment here. And that makes a real difference.
I completely agree. You've got real skin in the game, It's one thing to just venture raise off other people's money, but it's another to put in your own, how much hard work you've... I don't know how old you are, but you've probably put in 40 years of hard work.
I'm 50.
50? Okay, you put in 30 years of hard work to build your little nest egg and be like, cool, I'm going to now risk it all on this plant and hopefully, it comes out for you. But it takes a lot to actually throw your own assets behind what you're doing. So I commend you guys for that. And the fact that it's family run as well, I think it lends to, it's not just the people's plant, it's the family plant for you guys. Like it's so much more than just providing it to the people. This is providing to your family and beyond. And obviously your family of Australians. So I've really enjoyed sitting here and smelling the surroundings and having a chat to you guys, getting an idea of what the People's Plant's really about. I think you guys have a really good mission. I think the vision's clear. I think you're very much in touch with nature. As long as nature's kind to you, I can't really see why you're going to not succeed, and you're kind to it. So I think we've got something here. And I hope the broader Australian community sees how much work and how much energy it is to even just try and get something like this off the ground. Most people are like, oh yeah, if I had the money. You could have all the money in the world and you wouldn't get to this. I guarantee it. Most people just have no idea of this complexity. So big hats off to you guys. Thank you.
It's a long road.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen overnight. And yeah, there are companies that have had all the money in the world and they have failed.
They've still gone bust.
Yeah, they've failed. So it's not about having a lot of money.
Yeah, it's not the money.
It's the tenacity and the passion and
Yeah.
that connection with the actual plant. You actually have to know what you're doing.
Yeah, you have to love this plan.
Yeah.
I think that's what Canada showed. You saw a lot of those early startups that were more from venture money. They all bust. They went bust because they didn't get the plan at all.
They're totally disconnected. They thought it was just
Yeah.
a commodity.
And then eventually you had the smaller farms buy back the big farms. And
Yeah.
you're like, isn't that nice? Isn't
Very
that funny
nice.
how that happened? It came back to the people in the end.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see that in this industry in the next couple of years because it's starting to constrict and there's a lot of pain being felt by a lot of the producers.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping by the end of it, we're going to have a lot of good ethical companies that we love and are giving the people really good quality medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's how the industry is going to evolve and change. Like the industry is being fueled by a lot of greed. You start to reduce that profit down, and that greed starts to
Go
go
away.
and find somewhere else to,
Yeah.
go into AI. So right now we're actually in that process of the
Yeah.
profit is reducing, so the greed is departing,
Going elsewhere.
and
yeah.
we're actually going to be able to create a good business, a good quality, solid business that is has longevity in it. And we can serve a really high quality product to the Australian population.
It'd be
That's what we're
amazing
about.
if in like 100 years, I mean, we'll be dead, but if the People's Plant still exists
I'd
and,
love to
and
see
you have that like origin
Yeah.
story, it's like established 2019. Yeah. It's like, like they got in just before COVID and they survived, like there's almost something there. So I think it's going to be a long journey for you guys, but the vision and the mission that you guys have, it is made for a long journey. It's not made for a quick flip, a quick profit or something like that. It's made for the longevity of, well, this plant, which is forever. It will be here long past us humans, unless fire happens, but
Well, it's already been around for 28 million years.
Yeah.
So
it's probably going to continue doing its thing.
Yeah.
So thank you. And I hope you guys want to invest, or if not invest, tell some people, because it'd be nice to own a little piece of pot. Alrighty guys, thank you so much. I will be dropping all of the links for the People's Plant below. If you want to catch up with them or ask them some questions, have a look at their Instagram. There's some beautiful videos of their plants and what they're doing. The People's Plant there. You can have a look at the virtual platform. And yeah, get in touch, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joseph. And thank you for watching.
Talking about the smoking life and our love for buds and nuts and everything in between. And how